and Across the Fence, we're going with the grain. Bakers, farmers, and researchers are coming together to discuss the rising interest in growing grains in the Green Mountains. Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. Farmers have been growing grains in Vermont since colonial times with mixed results. With a short growing season and sometimes too much rain, growing grains in the Northeast is a challenge. But interest is growing. New seed varieties, lower startup costs, and the overwhelming public demand for local foods like bread, beer, and hemp has put Vermont grains in high demand. To support this interest, the annual Grain Growers Conference is being held on Thursday, March 22nd at the Essex Resort in Essex, Vermont. One of the organizers of this event is University of Vermont Extension agronomist Heather Darby. Welcome back, Heather. Good to see you again.
Judy.
Now, you and your colleagues have been hosting this conference for 14 years. What's changed about grains in that time?
Well, I'm not sure if anything has changed about grains themselves, but our venue has changed. You know, we started our first meeting at the Grange Hall in Bridport with, I think, 30 folks, and some people may remember Winway, a past extension agent, and he was our guest speaker. And since then, you know, now we have, you know, nearly 200 people that attend from all around the region. So more people and more interest. Yeah.
What are some of the challenges to growing grains that you've met with?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, agriculture in general is challenging, but growing grain is definitely not for the faint at heart. It's challenging primarily because of a little bit because of our short growing season, but mostly the weather here. We have, you know, those nice summer rains, sometimes often, and that humidity, high humidity and precipitation can be difficult for growing grains, high quality grains.
So how much of the increase in grain production is due to interest in local food, do you think?
Yeah, well, I don't want to say most of it. When we started, that's kind of how we really got going, was because there was a growing interest. There was also an interest from livestock producers to actually start thinking about growing more of their own grain. But yeah, I guess in general, it is all driven by a local demand, whether it's for livestock feed or for food products.
What are you hearing from bakers and brewers about the quality of the grains that are grown here?
Well, if the quality is good enough to make it to them, then usually they're pretty happy. But we have pretty, I want to say, tight quality control mechanisms that are used. We have a testing lab at the University of Vermont, as an example, to be able to test the grains to make sure that they meet the high quality that bakers and brewers want. So they're pretty happy with the products that they're getting.
Talk about the theme for this conference this year, diversifying grains for a changing climate.
Yeah. So when we were thinking about that with our planning committee, which includes farmers, when we said changing climate, I think most people think weather, which is true. The climate is definitely becoming a little more erratic, but we were also thinking about the economic and environmental climate, those changes that are occurring in the state and really across the country. So looking for ways for farmers to increase or diversify revenue streams, and looking at ways for farmers to meet new environmental regulations. So we're talking about cover cropping as an example. And then just dealing with the climate in general. How do we deal with more precipitation, which is already difficult for growing grains?
I was going to say, how does that affect grain production?
Yeah, well, you know, high quality grain production depends on a dry climate during the final stages of maturity. And so we rarely have that, and now it's even more difficult. So looking at new varieties, trying to find varieties resistant to diseases, and different strategies, kind of mitigating risk by different planting dates, and then making sure people have grain dryers.
Really? That's a thing?
That's a thing, yes.
Is it a machine or what is it?
Yeah, well, everybody sees a grain bin on a dairy farm, so it's very similar to that, except that there's dryers and air that can be forced up into the grain to make sure that it gets dry once it's harvested.
Okay. Yeah. Well, a grain that's been gaining interest in Vermont is hemp, and Heather and her colleagues at UVM Extension's Borderview Research Farm grew their first crop in 2016. She talked with Across the Fence at the time about what she has learned.
One of the primary pieces that I learned was that it does seem a bit weak as a seedling. It wasn't overly vigorous. We tried to cultivate it to control weeds, and we lost a lot of hemp that way. So we were really worried about the crop. I didn't think for the life of me that it could outcompete the weeds. And then all of a sudden, you know, it got to be about a foot tall, and then and immediately had a growth spurt, like it was a teenager or something, and it just grew. You know, it seemed like 3 or 4 feet in a matter of a week and a half or 2 weeks, and immediately rose above the weeds, wasn't an issue anymore, became a much more vigorous, sort of hardy plant.
For Darby, growing hemp has nothing to do with politics or the law. Her goal is to provide Vermont farmers with research-based knowledge to succeed, regardless of the crop.
I mean, I just want to find crops to help farmers stay viable, and you know, and I think this is a unique crop. So there's a lot of businesses out there that exist, a lot of businesses that are trying to get started right now. I think some of the barriers will diminish over time. Even over the 2 years we've been working on this, some of the barriers have lessened, diminished a bit. The USDA likely at some point will start funding the research. To me, I don't like to be left behind. Right? So why aren't we in Vermont on the forefront of something instead of behind, waiting for everybody else to do it? You know, and that's always been, you know, the way I operate. If I see an opportunity that I think that we should go after, let's go after it. If we believe that it could be something that would be good for Vermont farmers. And you know, this is a row crop. This isn't a crop that actually requires that much special equipment. So we're not trying to build new planters or a new kind of harvester. You know, this is harvested with a combine. And most states are looking at this as a commodity. And you know, obviously we're not going to grow hemp as a commodity in Vermont, likely not. And so the way we're looking at it is, how can we produce the highest quality hemp products in Vermont? Maybe it's organic or, you know, sustainable, whatever, you know, the approach we're going to take. It'll be like everything else we do here. It'll be for a local market with really high-end, high-quality products.
Well, we're joined now by Carrie Giguere. Carrie is the Agricultural Resource Management Section Chief for the Vermont Agency of Agriculture. One of his duties is overseeing the agency's hemp registration program. Thanks so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Good morning.
What is the status of Vermont's hemp registry?
It's growing every year. So far this year, we've got over 100 registrants already, and we still have a foot of snow on the ground.
And so getting hemp seed is tricky. Help us understand how someone actually gets the seeds in the first place to start planting.
So Vermonters are innovative, if you will. When the hemp program was originally established, there wasn't a mechanism for folks to get seeds. And through innovation, there are now seeds available for sale in Vermont or clones.
And Heather, tell me a little bit about your experience with when you started your hemp project and getting seeds.
Yeah, well, it was definitely really difficult, and probably even maybe a little more difficult because we work at the university, so we definitely have to go through all the kind of proper channels. So it took about a year to be able to get the first seed that we got. So it is a process, mostly because we have to import the seed, or at the time had to import the seed from out of the country. And anytime you do that, regardless of, you know, it being hemp or another crop, there's paperwork.
Right.
Takes time.
And especially too, I think I visited Board of View Farm when you were growing the hemp project, and you know, there were signs everywhere saying this is not marijuana.
Exactly, right. that makes it difficult.
Is that one of the hard parts about talking about hemp, is that people automatically think it's you're growing pot?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it depends. I think it's changing quite a bit. You know, there's a lot about hemp in the news, and people are a little bit more educated, but I think there's still that, you know, kind of stigma involved. Just when you see the plant in that video, even, you're like, whoa, you know, that's different.
Well, Carrie, what's the impact of Vermont's hemp industry?
Well,
now that marijuana's been legalized, as far as some uses of marijuana?
Some of that we're going to have to wait and see. But a lot of the people that will be growing for personal use in their backyard will not be producing males. They won't want the male plant, so it really won't affect a hemp field nearby. But if people are growing hemp for seed, it could go the other direction, where pollen drift into somebody's crop that's grown for personal use, so they may end up with seedy flowers. So it'll just mean that folks growing near hemp farms will have to be a little careful, growing the plants for their own personal use or move them indoors.
And so tell me a little bit about what hemp is used for, Heather.
Well, industrial hemp, which is what we've been working on at the university, can be used for any, range of products, really. The seed itself is used as a protein source. It's actually one of the primary protein sources right now in Japan and Korea. It actually became very popular after the nuclear explosion, and people couldn't eat as much fish. So it's a protein source. It's also used in medical products, salves, things like that. And then, of course, for the fiber to make clothing and things like hempcrete. So it's got a lot of uses. It's a plant, a multifunction plant for sure.
So how is Vermont grown hemp tested to make sure it's high quality?
Well, in terms of high quality, the seed itself is generally extruded for oil, and so there's no real testing from that perspective. But in terms of if it meets the kind of industrial hemp THC cutoff, there's special testing to determine that, available throughout the state and at the Agency of Agriculture.
And we're working on that. This session, the legislature's put forward a proposal to create a cannabis quality control program in the Agency of Agriculture. That would involve testing for quality more so than just cannabinoid content, not just the 0.3 and less THC, but looking for pesticide residues or fungal pathogens on the crop. And this is primarily around the CBD market. The grain and fiber, you don't necessarily care as much about contaminants, but we're looking to establish that at the State Ag Lab.
How tough is that to be able to get all this infrastructure in place for farmers to be able to grow a hemp crop?
I think in the field it's not that difficult because it utilizes a lot of equipment and types of tillage, all that kind of stuff is the same as growing really any other grain crop with the exception of fiber. But the other infrastructure that we need for processing, testing,
We're looking forward to sort of building that infrastructure for testing. We have a lab, we have the equipment, we have the personnel. It's just fitting it in with the rest of the work that we're already required to do. But it's a baby step process. We're looking to build an infrastructure that does support the industry. And Heather's been a pioneer here, so we're looking to the university to sort of help guide us.
And so if you're a farmer and you're interested in growing hemp, what do you have to do?
Register
with the agency.
What does that entail?
You're going to fill out a form, let us know how many acres you intend to grow, where you're going to grow it, and pay a small fee, really. And that's it. But some of the direction coming out of the legislature for the agency would require the agency to certify that spot, certify your farm, just have a look at where you're growing that hemp. And it's all part of moving towards a system more compliant with the Farm Bill, putting all of our hemp farmers under the same program that the university and Heather are already under.
And so, Heather, have you noticed an interest from farmers in doing this?
Yes.
Really?
It's over the top, actually.
No kidding.
Yeah, it daily calls. I'm sure Carrie gets the same thing. People are really interested, for different products. I think, again, people want to diversify.
Right.
They're hearing that maybe they can make a lot of money growing hemp. I'm not sure if that's true. So we try to be really realistic with people about what the opportunities really are. And most farmers are used to growing a crop and then, especially our dairy farmers, someone coming to get it and take it away and market it. And this is a different beast where the markets are really still in their infancy. There's not a lot of places to sell the product yet. So like Carrie said, they're growing, but it's moving pretty slowly. And I think the farms are really excited to start growing, but
Yeah.
some of the other pieces are lagging behind.
And this is just one of the things that folks can learn about at the 14th Annual Grain
Yes.
Growers Conference, which is being held on Thursday, March 22nd from 9 to 5:30 at the Essex Resort and Spa. Pre-registration is required and space is limited. Call the number on your screen or visit the Northwest Crops and Soils Program homepage. Thanks to both of you for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's our program for today. I'm Judy Simpson. I'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.